So, I never thought I'd be the guy writing one of these posts, but here we are. I'm 34M, my wife is 32F, and we've been together for 9 years, married for 5. Up until recently, I would have told you we were mostly fine. Not perfect, but stable. We had routines, inside jokes, shared plans, all the normal stuff people build a life on. But if I'm being honest, things started feeling off about 6 months ago. It wasn't one big moment. It was small things at first. She got sharper. Like everything I said annoyed her. I'd ask a simple question like, "Hey, what time are you home?" And she'd snap back with, "Why? Are you tracking me now?" Completely out of nowhere. Then the lying started. Or at least, that's when I noticed it. Little, pointless lies. She'd say she was at work, but I'd hear background noise that didn't sound like her office. Or she'd tell me she hadn't gone out, but I'd find receipts in her coat pocket from bars she never mentioned. When I'd ask, she always had an answer ready. Quick, defensive, and honestly, too polished. At first, I told myself I was overthinking. People get stressed. Work gets intense. Relationships go through phases. But there was this feeling in my gut I couldn't shake. Like something was quietly breaking behind the scenes, and I was the only one pretending not to hear it. And the worst part? Every time I tried to talk about it, she'd flip it on me. Say I was paranoid, controlling, or trying to start drama. So yeah, that's where this started. I wish I could say I trusted my instincts sooner. Looking back, the shift wasn't just in how she talked to me. It was everything around it. Her schedule stopped making sense. She used to be predictable. Same work hours, same gym days, same random, "I'm craving sushi" texts on Thursdays. Then suddenly, everything became flexible. Late meetings that weren't on her calendar before. Quick drinks with coworkers that stretched past midnight. Weekends where she just needed space, but wouldn't say from what. And yeah, I asked questions. Not aggressively, just normal stuff. But every time, I got a different version of reality. One night, she said she was working late on a project. Cool. I didn't push. Around 11 p.m., I texted her asking if she wanted me to leave some food out. No reply. At 1 a.m., she comes home smelling like perfume that definitely wasn't hers. Not subtle either. Strong, like she didn't even try to hide it. I asked calmly, "Hey, long night." She rolled her eyes, dropped her bag, and said, "Yeah, because I actually work, unlike you sitting around overthinking everything." That stung more than I expected. But here's the thing that really got to me. She didn't just deflect. She attacked. Every single time. Like the goal wasn't to explain anything, but to make me feel stupid for even asking. And still, I let it slide. I told myself, maybe she's stressed, maybe I'm being insecure, maybe I'm reading too much into things. But the inconsistencies kept piling up. Different stories about the same night. Names of coworkers I'd never heard before. Calls she'd taken in another room, and suddenly lower her voice. And then there was her phone. It went from just lying around to practically glued to her hand. Face down. Always on silent. Password changed. That's when the feeling in my gut turned into something heavier. Not proof. Not yet. But suspicion that was getting harder to ignore. At this point, I wasn't sleeping normal anymore. Not because of one big fight or some dramatic scene. Just this constant, low-level anxiety humming in the background. Like my brain was trying to piece something together while I kept telling it to shut up. I started noticing patterns I wish I hadn't. She'd smile at her phone, but never around me. Like, actually smile. The kind I hadn't seen directed at me in months. If I walked into the room, the screen would lock instantly. Not subtle. Automatic. One night, she was in the shower and left her phone on the kitchen counter. And yeah, I stood there for a full minute just staring at it. I'm not proud of what I did next. I know people on here are split about this kind of thing. But when your reality starts feeling warped, you reach for anything solid. I picked it up. Locked. Of course. But here's the weird part. The notification preview was still on. One message. Just one. No name saved. Just a number. Can't stop thinking about last night. You looked unreal. I swear my chest actually tightened. Like physically. For a second, I tried to rationalize it. Wrong number. Joke. Something stupid. Then another message popped in. Did he suspect anything? That was it. That was the moment everything shifted from, maybe I'm overthinking, to something is seriously wrong. I put the phone back exactly where it was. Same angle. Same position. Like somehow that would undo what I just saw. She came out of the shower a few minutes later like nothing had happened. Towel in her hair, scrolling casually, asking me if we needed groceries. Normal. Completely normal. And I just stood there, looking at her, realizing I had no idea who I was talking to anymore. I didn't confront her right away. I know some people would have just exploded on the spot, shoved the phone in her face, demanded answers. Honestly, I wanted to. My hands were literally shaking that night. But something stopped me. Maybe it was the way she acted so normal. Like nothing in her world had shifted at all. Meanwhile, mine had just cracked open. So I stayed quiet. And yeah, I hate admitting this, but I started paying closer attention. Not in a spy movie way, just observing. Listening. Trying to see if what I saw was a one-off or part of something bigger. Spoiler, it was bigger. Over the next week, things escalated fast. She started stepping outside to take calls. Not even pretending anymore. Just grabbing her phone, saying, "I'll be right back," and disappearing onto the balcony or into the hallway. Once, I followed. Not all the way, just enough to hear her tone. Soft, quiet, almost affectionate. I hadn't heard her talk to me like that in months. When she came back in and saw me, she didn't even flinch. "Work?" she said, before I could ask. Just like that. Preloaded answer. Another lie. Then came the schedule change that really didn't add up. She told me she had a 2-day work conference out of town. Sent me a screenshot of some agenda. Looked legit at a glance, I guess. But something about it felt off. The formatting was weird. No company branding. Generic titles. So I did something I hadn't done before. I checked. I looked up the event. Didn't exist. Not a trace. No listings. No announcements. Nothing. At that point, I wasn't even shocked anymore. Just cold. Like my brain had finally caught up to what my gut had been screaming for months. And the worst part? She still left the next morning with a suitcase, kissed me on the cheek, and said, "Don't miss me too much." Like I was the idiot in this story. And maybe, up until then, I kind of was. The moment she walked out that morning with her suitcase, something in me just switched. Not rage. Not even sadness. Clarity. For months, I'd been second-guessing myself, explaining things away, letting her rewrite reality in real time. But now, I had enough pieces to stop pretending this was all in my head. So instead of spiraling, I did something I hadn't done before. I decided to actually find out the truth. Not guesses. Not gut feelings. Proof. I waited about an hour after she left. Long enough that she'd be on the road to this fake conference. Then I called her office. Kept it casual. Said I needed to confirm something about her schedule. The receptionist checked, and yeah, no surprise, no conference, no business trip. She had taken 2 personal days off. I remember just sitting there after the call ended, staring at nothing. It's weird how betrayal doesn't always hit like an explosion. Sometimes it's quieter than that. Heavier. Like something sinking. But I still needed to know where she actually was. And this is the part I'm not proud of, but I think most people in my position would understand. We share a tablet at home. Mostly for streaming, random stuff. She'd logged into her email on it months ago and never logged out. I opened it. I told myself I'd just look for something obvious. Confirmation. Anything that explained what I already knew. I didn't have to dig far. There it was. A booking confirmation. Hotel. 2 nights. Same dates as her conference. Not even in another city. 15 minutes away. I actually laughed. Not because it was funny. More like my brain didn't know how else to process how ridiculous it all was. All the lies. All the effort. And she couldn't even go far enough to make it believable. But the worst part wasn't the hotel. It was the second name on the reservation. Because I recognized it. Yeah, I recognized the name immediately. Not some random guy. Not a stranger. It was Mark. And that's when everything went from "this is bad" to "this is actually messed up." Mark wasn't just some coworker I'd heard about once or twice. I knew him. We'd met multiple times. He'd been in our apartment. Sat on our couch. Drank my beer. Shook my hand like everything was normal. She always introduced him as just a colleague. Nothing special. If anything, she used to roll her eyes when mentioning him, like he annoyed her. Apparently, that was a lie too. I went back through her emails, and once I saw his name, it was like pulling a thread that unraveled everything. There were more bookings. Not many, but enough. Random weekdays. Late meetings. Team outings. All lining up perfectly with nights she either came home late or barely talked to me at all. And then I found something worse than the hotel confirmations. Photos. Not explicit or anything, but intimate enough. Selfies and mirrors. Him behind her. arm around her waist. Her smiling, really smiling, the way she hadn't with me in a long time. Different version of her. Warmer, softer, real. That part hit harder than I expected, because it meant this wasn't just physical. It wasn't a one-time mistake or some impulsive thing. This was ongoing, intentional. I sat there for I don't even know how long, just staring at the screen, feeling like an idiot for every time I defended her in my own head. Every time I thought, no, she wouldn't do that. She did. And not only that, she built an entire second reality around it, while making me feel like I was crazy for noticing cracks in the first one. At that point, I had more than enough proof. The question wasn't, is she cheating, anymore. It was, what the hell do I do with this? For a few hours, I didn't do anything. I just sat there, phone in my hand, her email still open on the tablet, staring at that hotel confirmation like it might suddenly change if I looked long enough. It didn't. At some point, I started pacing back and forth across the apartment. Same path over and over again. That's when the anger finally kicked in. Not loud, not explosive, cold. The kind that makes you think clearly in a way that's almost unsettling. Because suddenly, I wasn't confused anymore. I wasn't doubting myself. I wasn't asking what if. I knew exactly what was happening. And I knew exactly where she was. 15 minutes away. In a hotel room. With a guy who'd looked me in the eyes and acted like he respected me. I actually grabbed my keys at one point. I was this close to driving there. Kicking the door in. Forcing the truth out into the open in the most brutal, undeniable way possible. And yeah, part of me still wishes I did. But another part of me, the part that had been ignored for months, finally spoke up. What does that actually solve? I stopped. Because the truth is, I didn't need more proof. I didn't need to see them together. I didn't need some dramatic scene to validate what I already knew. I already had it. And showing up there? That wouldn't be about truth. That would be about anger. So instead, I did something else. I started documenting everything. Screenshots of emails. The hotel booking. The photos. Dates. Times. If she wanted to lie, twist things, call me paranoid again, I wasn't going to let that happen this time. No more confusion. No more gaslighting. Just facts. And once I had everything saved, organized, backed up, I finally sat down and thought about the one thing I'd been avoiding this whole time. How I was going to confront her. Because one way or another, that conversation was coming. I'm done, I said. It came out calmer than I expected. Not shaky. Not angry. Just decided. She blinked at me like she didn't process it at first. What? She asked. I'm done, I repeated. With this. With us. With whatever this has been for the last few months. That finally got a reaction. Not sadness, irritation. You can't just say that, she said immediately. We're married. Yeah, I nodded. We are. And you still chose to lie, cheat, and then blame me for noticing. She scoffed again, but it didn't have the same confidence as before. This is not how this works, she said, voice rising slightly. You don't just end a marriage over one mistake. One mistake. That phrase again. I almost laughed. One mistake. I said, tell me which part. The hotel? The photos? The months of lying? Or the part where you told me I was paranoid every time I asked basic questions? She didn't answer. Instead, she went back to what she knew. You're being emotional, she said. You're not thinking clearly right now. That one actually made me pause. Because it was so familiar. So rehearsed. Like she'd used it before to smooth things over. To redirect. To make me question my own judgment. But it didn't work anymore. I've never thought more clearly in my life, I said. That quieted her again. For a second, she just looked at me. Really looked at me. Like she was trying to figure out if I was serious. Then she changed tactics. You're going to regret this, she said. Not a threat. Not even loud. Just matter of fact. Like she was stating something inevitable. And I remember thinking, maybe that used to work on me. But not anymore. Because for the first time in a long time, I wasn't afraid of losing her. I was afraid of what staying would have cost me. That, you're going to regret this, line stuck in the air for a moment. Like she expected it to hit me the way it probably used to. Make me second-guess myself, soften the edges, pull me back into negotiation. But it didn't land. Instead, something else happened. She realized it. You can always tell when someone notices they're losing control of the situation. The tone shifts first. Then the posture. Then the urgency starts creeping in. So what? You're just going to throw everything away? She asked, voice tightening. 9 years? For what? Because you went through my private stuff. I shook my head. No, I said. Not because I saw your messages. Because of what you did before I ever saw them. That made her pause again. For a second, she looked like she might finally say something real. Something honest. But it didn't come. Instead, she went quieter. This is Mark's fault too, she said suddenly. That caught me off guard. I blinked. Excuse me? She sighed, like she was shifting blame to something inconvenient. He pursued me when things were already stressful, she said. You don't understand what it's like at work. He made it complicated. There it was again. Complicated. Always something external. Always something pushing her into it. Never her choice. Never her responsibility. And you couldn't say no, I said. I tried, she snapped quickly. Clearly not hard enough, I replied. That hit something. Her expression hardened again. You think you're perfect? She said. You've been distant for months. You barely noticed me. You act like this just came out of nowhere. I nodded slowly. So your solution was to sleep with someone else instead of telling me that? Silence. This time she didn't have a quick answer ready. And that silence said more than anything else in the conversation. Because for the first time, there was no script left. No deflection. No blame shift that fit cleanly. Just the reality of what had actually happened, sitting between us. And I could feel it shifting. This wasn't going to be fixed. It was already over. It just hadn't been officially said by both sides yet. After that silence, the energy in the room changed completely. Not explosive. Not dramatic. Just final. She looked around the apartment like she was suddenly noticing it differently. Like she was trying to find something familiar to anchor herself to, but it wasn't working anymore. This is insane, she said again. But this time it sounded less like an attack and more like disbelief. You're actually going to do this? I already did, I replied. That made her scoff, but weaker now. You're not thinking about the practical side of this, she said, shifting again, back into problem-solving mode. We have a lease. Shared accounts. Plans. Yeah, I said. We'll figure that out legally. That word, legally, changed her expression slightly. Not fear exactly, but realization. Because suddenly this wasn't just an emotional argument she could twist. It was moving into consequences. You're really going to drag this into lawyers? She asked. I'm not dragging anything, I said. You already did that when you decided to lie for months. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. For the first time, she looked like she didn't have a clean angle left. So she tried something different. I made a mistake, she said softer. People make mistakes. I nodded slowly. Yeah, I said. But you kept making it. Every day, while looking me in the eye and lying about it. That shut her down again. And then something unexpected happened. She sat down, right there on the kitchen chair, like the argument had physically drained her. Not crying. Not apologizing. Just sitting. I didn't think you'd actually leave, she said quietly. That line hit differently. Because it wasn't about guilt. It was about assumption. She hadn't been worried about consequences because she genuinely believed I would stay. No matter what. And that realization made everything feel even more finished than before. I looked at her for a moment. Then I said the only thing left that made sense. I did. And that was it. The conversation didn't continue after that. The next hour felt strangely procedural. No more arguments. No more explanations. Just the slow, uncomfortable reality of two people realizing they were done. She eventually stood up and started pacing, but not in the emotional way from earlier. More like she was trying to regain control of something that had already slipped away. You can't just expect me to leave immediately, she said at one point. I'm not expecting anything, I replied. But I'm not continuing this either. That stopped her mid-step. We ended up splitting the logistics in fragments, like strangers dividing shared space rather than a couple dissolving a marriage. Keys. Accounts. Who sleeps where tonight? What gets moved first? It was surreal how quickly everything became practical once the emotional part was truly over. At one point, she asked, almost quietly, "Do you hate me now?" I remember thinking about that for a second. Not out of spite. Just honesty. No, I said. I don't think I have the energy for that. That seemed to confuse her more than anger would have. Because hate would have meant I still had something invested. But I didn't. Not anymore. When she finally left the room to pack a bag for the night, I just sat there for a while. No thoughts racing. No urge to follow or fix or replay anything. Just emptiness where confusion used to be. And weirdly, clarity with it. If there's one thing I learned from all of this, it's that people rarely become someone else overnight. The signs were there. The inconsistencies, the defensiveness, the rewriting of reality. I just kept choosing to explain them away because the alternative was harder to face. If I had any advice for someone reading this, don't ignore the small things that make you feel crazy, because by the time you need proof, you've usually already been living inside it for a while. And no matter how it ends, confrontation, reconciliation, or walking away, you can't fix something that requires one person to stop lying and refuse to